Lesson 2. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the definition of a parallelogram, the properties of it, and also how to apply the properties to find angles and lengths. So would you please look at page 6 of the textbook? On page 6, please look at section 4.2. This is the definition of a parallelogram. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral. It has two pairs of parallel opposite sides. It means whenever you see a quadrilateral and you find out one pair, two pairs of parallel opposite sides, and you know this must be a parallelogram. And now, would you please turn to page number 8 of the textbook? On page number 8, you can see a big green box, and there are three properties of a parallelogram. The first one is about opposite sides. It means if you know this is a parallelogram already, the opposite sides must be equal. So AB and dot cat must be the same. A dot and boy cat must be the same as well. The second property is about opposite angles. If you know this is a parallelogram, angle A and C must be the same. Similarly, boy dot will be equal. The last property is about diagonals. What is a diagonal? Diagonal means AC and boy dot, they are the diagonals. That means the straight line joining opposite angles. What is bisect? Bisect means cutting into two equal halves. So the third property, it means the diagonals of a parallelogram, they will bisect each other. That means cutting each other into two equal halves. So AO equal to CO, BO equal DO. And now we will use a simple reason to summarize all the three properties. PROP dot is stands for property of, this is the short form of parallelogram. We will use this reason instead of all these three. That means, boys and girls, in the exam, you do not need to write down these three. You can just write down property of parallelogram when you are using any of them. And now, I'm going to tell you how to apply these three properties to solve the example. Would you please look at example 4.1? Now in this example, you are given a quadrilateral, so let's look at this quadrilateral together. We see one parallel and two parallel opposite sides. So I know this must be a quadrilateral. And of course, it's given already. In the figure, ABCD is a parallelogram, you are told already. And now you ask to find out what is the value of X and value of angle A, angle B. So, boys and girls, when you look at this parallelogram and you ask to find out the value of X, that means we are looking at the opposite angles. So you can refer to the properties. The second property is about opposite angles. That means you can look at this property and see whether it is helpful to you. So how can you present your answer? At the very beginning, we will write down a statement because ABCD is a parallelogram. So all the reader, when they read it, they know, oh, this is parallelogram. And now your work after, they are all following this conclusion. So after it, you can write down B and D, they must be the same because according to property 2, opposite angles, they must be equal. So angle B equal to angle D, reason, property of parallelogram. So you know 2x plus 5 equals 3x minus 28. And so you can solve the value of x. For part B, it's easy to find out angle B because in A you have x already. You can simply substitute x into 2x plus 5 and then you will find out the value of B for boy. And after that, how to find angle A, boys and girls. Now it's not about the content today, it's about what you have learned in Form 1. Can you see the letter C for cat? So it's about interior angles of parallel straight lines. So you can write down A and B, they are equal to 180 because interior angles AD parallel BC, which you learned in Form 1. And so you can solve the value of A. And now I'm going to talk about one more examples. Example 4.2. In this example, you are given another quadrilateral ABCD. So let's look at this quadrilateral together. I see one and two pairs of parallel opposite sides. So I know this must be a parallelogram. So if this is a parallelogram, I can immediately recall the properties I've learned. So with the question, ABCD is a parallelogram and find X and Y. So we look at the figure X and Y. They are about diagonals. So boys and girls, if we go back to the properties, of course, property 1 is not useful to us because it's about opposite sides but not diagonal. Property 2 also not useful to us because it's about opposite angles. So property 3, it may be useful because it's concerning the diagonals. So I will go back to example 4.2. In the solution, I will first write down because ABCD is a parallelogram. So I think the textbook does not present the work well. So please insert because ABCD is a parallelogram yourself. And after that, you can conclude AO equal to CO. That means X equal to 4. With no calculation, I know X is 4 already. Reason, property of parallelogram. Secondly, how about BO and DO? They are also the same because property of parallelogram. So you know y plus 2 equal to x. So you can find out the value of x and value of y in this sense. Boys and girls, that's the end of the lesson today. To conclude, I would like to remind you, whenever you look at a parallelogram and you find out one pair, two pair of opposite parallel lines, one pair, two pairs, you know this must be a parallelogram. And then you can immediately recall the three properties you learned. One concerning opposite sides, another one opposite angles, and one more diagonals. And then you can use them, property of parallelogram, to solve the problem. And do not forget, in your presentation, remember to write down ABCD is a parallelogram at the very beginning. And then you can go on to use the properties. That's the end of the lesson. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.